Randy Moss had his doubts, but the real betrayal came from the NFL front offices. Despite glaring quarterback problems, the Pittsburgh Steelers passed on Shedeur Sanders without even giving him a real look. Why? Insiders say it was never about his talent. It was about his last name. The association with Coach Prime made Sanders a political risk in rooms that pretend to be about merit.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
And while Tomlin offered public praise, behind closed doors, Sanders was never on their board. The Browns gave him a shot. The Steelers gave him the cold shoulder. That decision just came back to haunt them. The fallout was more than symbolic. Sanders didn't just outperform expectations. He exposed the fragile foundation of those who dismissed him. This is bigger than one player and one team. It's a reality check for an entire league that still lets legacy and perception override performance and character. Sanders' rise forces the NFL to confront its contradictions, especially when the very traits they claim to value are ignored when found in the wrong package. You heard the noise. You saw the clips. You probably even rolled your eyes. Another week, another sports pundit taking aim at Shedeur Sanders like it's some kind of hobby. But this time it wasn't just a stray jab. It was a full-blown character assassination, live on national TV. Rex Ryan, with all the confidence in the world and none of the evidence, called Shedeur soft, questioned his toughness, questioned his work ethic, said he didn't have what it took to beat the Steelers. And just like that, the narrative was set. But Shedeur didn't take the bait. He didn't go on a rant, didn't tweet back, didn't post a flashy Instagram story. He responded in the most brutal way possible, by letting his game speak. Quietly, methodically, and completely, he dismantled every piece of criticism aimed at him with the one thing Rex Ryan couldn't argue with: results. The irony? Rex Ryan wasn't offering football analysis. He was peddling assumptions. He went on national television and dismissed Shedeur's rookie season like it was a joke. His commentary wasn't about stats or tape. It was personal. He painted Shedeur as entitled, fragile, undeserving of the spotlight. Said the Browns wouldn't stand a chance. That they were going to get handled by Pittsburgh. Except they didn't. What they did was expose how wrong Rex was, not just about the outcome, but about everything. The whole take collapsed under the weight of what actually happened on the field. And what made it worse? This wasn't the first time voices in the media tried to write a false story about Shedeur. But this one came with receipts. When the Browns took the field against the Steelers, Shedeur wasn't just playing to win a game. He was playing to shut it all down. The Browns weren't supposed to win. According to critics, they had no shot. But Shedeur led them to a clutch, high-pressure victory that eliminated the Steelers from playoff contention. Completely flipped the script. He didn't flinch. He didn't fold. He didn't play like a rookie who'd just been dragged through the mud by a former head coach. He played like a leader. The kind of quarterback who doesn't just weather the storm. He turns it into fuel. And in that moment, every lie told about him fell apart. The Steelers came in with playoff hopes. They left with shattered expectations. Shedeur didn't just beat them. He embarrassed the narrative that said he couldn't. His precision, command, and composure under pressure weren't flukes. They were proof. The kind of proof that silences even the loudest critics. It wasn't just a good performance, it was decisive. Every throw, every decision was measured. Shedeur wasn't rattled by the moment. He owned it. It was more than a game. It was vindication. And while Ryan's words aged like milk, Shedeur's performance stood tall as the defining. Post-game, Shedeur didn't gloat. He didn't throw shots. He did what he always does, kept it respectful, kept it real. When asked about the noise, he brushed it off. He talked about the team, the preparation, the win. That's the difference. While some people scream for attention, Shedeur leads with poise. He had every reason to clap back publicly, but he didn't need to, because winning does the talking. And this win said everything that needed to be said. Then there was Mike Tomlin. Publicly, he praised Shedeur's toughness, said all the right things in front of the cameras. But behind the scenes, a very different story. Because when it came time to make draft decisions, the Steelers weren't interested. Not because of talent, not because of fit, but because of who Shedeur's father is. Because of the Coach Prime brand. Internal voices reportedly made it clear. They weren't going to draft Shedeur, no matter where he fell. And that's where this story stops being about football and starts being about something. And while some organizations played politics, others showed real character. Ravens quarterback Tyler Huntley didn't just send a text. He called Shedeur early in the morning before that Steelers game. Told him to go win it. That kind of support? That's not performative. That's real. It was a moment that cut through the noise. While some in the league were actively trying to hold Shedeur back, others were lifting him up. Huntley didn't just recognize the talent. He recognized the pressure, the bias, the weight Shedeur was carrying. And he had his back. At the press conference after the win, Shedeur didn't change his tone. He didn't boast. He was calm, composed, focused on the future. Talked about the team's growth. Talked about execution. The contrast between him and the chaos around him couldn't have been clearer. He showed maturity beyond his years. Not just in play calling, but in perspective. Where others see controversy, he sees opportunity. Where others look for drama, he stays focused on the goal. And that kind of mindset isn't just rare, it's invaluable. You look at the full body of work this season, and the story becomes undeniable. Shedeur didn't just get through his rookie year. He dismantled the lie that he wasn't ready. From poise in the pocket to leadership off the field, he delivered across the board. Every matchup, every snap was another chance to prove he belonged. And he didn't waste a single one. Critics said he'd crumble. Instead, he carved up defenses. They said he'd be a distraction. He became the core. His consistency made it impossible to keep, and it wasn't just one game. Week after week, Shedeur elevated the Browns against top-tier defenses. In high-stakes moments, he wasn't being carried, he was carrying. And in a season full of chaos, he became the one thing the Browns could count on. That's what makes the earlier smear campaign so exhausting. Because none of it held up. Not the soft label. Not the entitled narrative. Every one of those claims collapsed under the weight of the actual season. And while the media scrambled to spin a new story, the old one was already dead. What made Rex Ryan's comments so ridiculous wasn't just how wrong they turned out to be. It's that they were clearly rooted in something deeper. His critique wasn't a breakdown of mechanics or scheme. It was laced with personal judgment. Rex didn't see a quarterback trying to earn his place. He saw the son of Coach Prime and projected every stereotype he could think of. And the worst part? That kind of commentary doesn't exist in a vacuum. When a former NFL coach goes on air and casually questions a young black quarterback's toughness, it feeds into a cycle. A narrative that's followed Shedeur since the moment he stepped onto a football field. One that says his confidence is arrogance, that his poise is entitlement, that his talent isn't earned. Rex didn't walk it back, even after the game. Even after Shedeur outplayed expectations, exposed the flaws in Pittsburgh's defense, and dismantled the idea that he couldn't deliver under pressure. Rex doubled down, talked about consistency, shifting the goalposts as if his original take wasn't already buried by reality. But this wasn't just about being wrong. It was about being reckless. A man with a platform, using it to undermine a rookie quarterback without evidence, and refusing to acknowledge the mistake when the evidence hit him in the face. It's a level of ego that makes accountability impossible. Shedeur didn't flinch. His approach to all of it? Stay focused. Ignore the noise. Let your work talk louder than the people who don't believe in you. He knew the easiest way to silence a voice like Rex Ryan's wasn't a rebuttal. It was a box score. And the numbers didn't lie. Shedeur wasn't padding stats in garbage time. He was leading drives when the game was on the line. He was taking hits and standing tall. He wasn't protected by a perfect roster or scheme. He was building something from scratch, in real time, under pressure. After that win against Pittsburgh, Shedeur sat at the podium with the kind of presence you rarely see in first-year quarterbacks. No anger. No smugness. Just clarity. A focus on what mattered. The team, the execution, the next step. He didn't mention Rex. He didn't need to. Everyone watching already knew what had just happened. Every journalist in the room knew the story had flipped. And Shedeur wasn't there to celebrate revenge. He was already talking about what needed to improve. That's not just leadership. That's elite mental discipline. But Mike Tomlin's role in this drama can't be ignored either. Publicly, he played it cool, gave Shedeur his props, praised his composure and talent. But behind closed doors, it was a different tone. Insiders made it clear. The Steelers never seriously considered drafting him. Why? Not because he lacked the skill, but because of optics. Because of the baggage that came with being Deion Sanders' son. Because of assumptions about who Shedeur is and who he would be in an NFL locker room. Those assumptions cost Pittsburgh a franchise quarterback. On the field that day, Shedeur played like he knew exactly what was at stake. It wasn't just a division rivalry. It was personal. Pittsburgh didn't want him. They didn't believe in him. They went out of their way to ignore what was right in front of them. So when Shedeur carved up their secondary, when he stayed poised under blitz pressure, when he walked off that field with the win, it hit differently. Because that was the team that said no. That was the team that bet against him. And he made sure they remembered it. This wasn't a one-game fluke. It was the latest in a pattern. From the start of the season, Shedeur had been grinding, growing, proving he belonged. Every time the media said he couldn't hang, he showed up. Every time a defense came at him, he adjusted. He took more hits than most rookies, worked behind a line that wasn't exactly elite, played through schemes that weren't always friendly. And still, he showed flashes of what a true franchise QB looks like. Not just in the highlight plays, but in the little decisions, the footwork, the timing. In his post-game interview after the Steelers win, Shedeur didn't dunk on anyone. He didn't shade Pittsburgh. He didn't mention the people who counted him out. He thanked his teammates, talked about execution, spoke about belief. But the subtext was loud. Because you can't fake growth. You can't fake that kind of performance under pressure. And when someone's been doubted as heavily as Shedeur, you don't need to say it out loud. The scoreboard said it for him. Across the season, Shedeur elevated the Browns, took a team with major flaws and made them competitive. He wasn't surrounded by all-pros. He wasn't being babied by conservative play calling. He was thrown into the fire and told to survive. And not only did he survive, he made people rethink the entire narrative. Critics started shifting their tone. Analysts who once labeled him entitled began admitting he had something. Because once you watch the tape, once you see how he commands an offense, it becomes harder and harder to deny. That's how reputations change, not through speeches, but through. And through it all, Shedeur wasn't alone. That early morning phone call from Tyler Huntley? That mattered. It wasn't a media stunt. It was a genuine check-in. A go-get-it-done from someone who understood the grind, who saw what Shedeur was facing and gave him that extra fuel. It was brotherhood, not branding. In a league that often pretends to be supportive while tearing players down behind the scenes, Huntley's message stood out. It reminded people that behind the headlines, there are real relationships that matter, and real voices telling you to keep going. There was never a moment this season where Shedeur Sanders backed down. Not from criticism, not from adversity, not from the weight of carrying a franchise that wasn't expected to go anywhere. Every game, every week, he suited up with something to prove, and not just to his critics, but to himself. His interviews reflected that same calm intensity. No outbursts, no drama, just focused answers, measured tone, and a quiet fire that said, "Watch what I do next." He didn't need to tell people he belonged in the league. His composure spoke volumes before the ball was even snapped. But Rex Ryan couldn't help himself. Even after the season turned in Shedeur's favor, even after key performances that turned heads, Rex kept reaching for ways to poke holes in the narrative. He shifted from calling Shedeur soft to calling him too polished, as if even poise could be weaponized. It was a masterclass in backpedaling. First it was, he can't handle pressure. Then it was, he only performs in low-stakes moments. Then it was, he's benefiting from media protection. Every time Shedeur proved one thing wrong, a new excuse was loaded up, ready to fire. Meanwhile, Mike Tomlin stood in the background of this entire arc like a symbol of everything that went unsaid. The Steelers could have drafted Shedeur. They had the opportunity. They saw the need. They knew the potential. And they passed. Publicly, Tomlin played the part of the respectful veteran coach. Behind closed doors, the reality was colder. The decision not to draft Shedeur was already made, well before the board fell into place. Not based on talent, not based on fit, but based on assumptions. It was an institutional no dressed up as a personnel move. So when Shedeur stood on that field against Pittsburgh and took complete control, it wasn't just a win, it was a referendum. On the decision, on the judgment, on the unspoken bias that shaped it. His reads were crisp. His poise was untouchable. His leadership was obvious. Every drive looked like a response. Not in an angry way, but in a you missed out way. He wasn't trying to prove them wrong. He already had. And, as the game went on, with the Steelers' season hanging in the balance, it became obvious to anyone watching. This was the guy they should have. This game didn't exist in isolation. It was just the sharpest example of a pattern that had been developing all season long. Go back and look at the matchups. Game after game, Shedeur handled defenses with a calm that most first-year players just don't have. He didn't play perfect football, but he played real football. Took the tough hits. Made the smart reads. Avoided panic when the pocket collapsed. He was a problem solver on the field, and no matter what kind of chaos the defense threw at him, he never spiraled. That's not flash, that's... After it all, standing in front of reporters, Shedeur's demeanor didn't change. He wasn't rattled by the win. He wasn't gloating. He talked about team culture, about accountability, about staying focused. You could see in his answers that he knew this wasn't the end. It was just a checkpoint. And in that moment, it was hard not to notice how different he was from the people who doubted him. Where they relied on exaggeration, he stayed grounded. Where they made noise, he worked. Where they tried to manufacture drama, he delivered performance. It wasn't just a win on the field. It was a win in the way he carried himself. That same tone carried into the post-game tunnel interview. Reporters asked about the pressure, about the noise, about what it felt like to eliminate the Steelers. Shedeur didn't take the bait. He gave credit to his teammates, talked about execution. But what he didn't say was just as powerful, because the look on his face said it all. He knew what had just happened, knew who had been watching, knew who had to sit with that loss. That's the kind of moment you don't need to over-explain. The win did all the... The bigger picture is what makes this story hit even harder. This Browns team wasn't set up for a fairy tale. They had instability, holes in key positions, a rookie QB stepping into a fractured locker room. And somehow, Shedeur turned that into a competitive season. Every time it looked like the team might unravel, Shedeur stepped up. He didn't just show flashes, he kept raising the bar. He didn't rely on hype. He built credibility one game at a time. And by the end of the season, the Browns weren't limping. They were. Part of what kept Shedeur grounded was who he kept around him. Tyler Huntley's support wasn't just about words. It was about timing. That early morning call wasn't random. It came at a moment when everything was stacked against Shedeur. The critics were loud. The pressure was real. The stakes were high. And instead of jumping into the spotlight, Huntley offered quiet strength, encouragement, a reminder of who Shedeur was and why he belonged. It wasn't a viral moment. It wasn't for clicks. It was just one pro looking out for another. And in a world full of noise, that kind of message cuts deeper than anything on air. By the time the dust settled, the contrast between Shedeur and Rex Ryan couldn't have been clearer. One man used his platform to tear down. The other used his performance to build something. One clung to outdated assumptions. The other broke them, one snap at a time. And that's the legacy of this season. Not just that Shedeur proved someone wrong, but that he redefined what being right looks like. Not through viral rants or media games, but through leadership, poise, and undeniable play on the field. That's what silences the noise for good. Ryan tried to turn confidence into a flaw, as if believing in yourself somehow made you less credible. He kept returning to that tired narrative. Shedeur had it too easy, didn't earn it, was only in the spotlight because of his last name. But what he couldn't admit was that none of those things held up once the tape started rolling. You can't fake leadership. You can't fake grit in the pocket when you're getting blitzed every other snap. You can't fake poise when the season's on the line and everyone expects you to fold. Rex pushed the story, but Shedeur rewrote it. Not with words. He did it with execution. And when that became impossible to ignore, the silence from Ryan was louder than any of his old takes. What Shedeur accomplished this season wasn't about flash. It was about substance. He didn't ask for special treatment. He didn't coast on hype. He earned every yard, every touchdown, every ounce of respect. And through it all, he stayed grounded, spoke with clarity, never made excuses, never ducked from criticism. That kind of consistency? It's what separates stars from noise. While the media searched for a storyline, Shedeur stayed locked in. While some analysts questioned his maturity, he answered with resilience. He knew who he was, and more importantly, he knew who he wasn't. And that identity never wavered, no matter how loud the chaos. By the end of the season, the transformation was undeniable. This wasn't just about one player silencing critics. It was about a franchise shifting its trajectory. A rookie quarterback with every reason to crack under pressure ended up becoming a stabilizer for an entire team. The Browns didn't need a savior. They needed someone who refused to settle. And that's what Shedeur gave them. Week after week, he showed that leadership isn't about noise. It's about presence, about doing the job, elevating the people around you, and making every moment count. Even in losses, he showed growth. Even in wins, he stayed humble. At the final press conference, Shedeur didn't use the platform to look back. He used it to look ahead. Talked about what needed to improve. Talked about keeping the same hunger. No gloating. No told you so. Just eyes on the next step. That's why this story matters. Because it's not just a "he proved them wrong" tale. It's a blueprint. For every young player being boxed in by assumptions. For every underdog being overlooked because of who they are or who their family is. Shedeur didn't just survive the pressure. He turned it into his fuel. If you've been following this journey, you know this wasn't luck. This was hard-earned, well-deserved, and long overdue. So if you're here for more stories that cut through the noise and bring you the truth behind the headlines, go ahead. Drop your thoughts in the comments, share this with someone who doubted him, and hit subscribe. Because Shedeur's just getting started, and we'll be right here for every step.